today, this afternoon, we will talk about how to enhance intangible cultural heritage through educational path and new professions. Okay. Here we have Alberto Bentoglio from the University of Milan, then Paolo Carafa from Sapienza, Rome University, and Carlo Bianchini from, I don't know where you're from, sorry.
Yes.
Sapienza, Rome, sorry, both of them. Okay. So, I believe we can start. Okay, so who is the first one? Alberto. Okay, he's Alberto.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is always Alberto Bentoglio. I'm truly honored to be here with you in Expo in Osaka, and I'm a professor of performing arts at the University of Milan, and I teach theater history and dance history, and I studied the organization of theater and cultural heritage system. But I'm also the principal investigator of the project Creativity and Intangible Cultural Heritage, part of the Italian National Research Program called Changes. So today, this afternoon, I would like to share with you a new way of thinking about cultural heritage. Intangible heritage is not just a treasure from the past, but it's a living resource for the future. In Italy, we are working to connect our deep tradition with creativity, technology, and innovation. So we are developing new professions that help to protect, renew, and share our cultural identity in contemporary ways. So let's explore together how tradition and innovation can truly walk side by side. Intangible cultural heritage means living knowledge. It includes oral tradition, rituals, music, dance, craftsmanship, languages, food, culture, and of course performing arts. Practice passed from generation to generation. But it's not only about preserving the past. It's about protecting what communities still live, do, and share today. Intangible heritage is a dynamic process. It evolves, adapts, and responds to new context. It connects identity, memory, innovation, and creativity. And it can become a tool for education, inclusion, sustainability, and transformation. Why talk about profession and non only preservation? Because preservation alone is not enough. Heritage needs people who can activate, reinterpret, and transmit it in meaningful ways. Talking about profession means recognize that cultural heritage requires skills, training, creativity, and responsibility. Real jobs like cultural design, digital curators, heritage communicators, these are not dreams, they are essential role to bring heritage into the future. And what is creativity and intangible cultural heritage? Is a part of Changes, a young foundation focused on creativity, contemporary practice, and intangible heritage. Its mission connects tradition and innovation with cultural models, sustainable practices, and professional development. It promotes training programs, digital tools, new profession, and experimental projects in performing arts, music, design, fashion, and crafts. Heritage becomes a living resource for creativity, education, and inclusion. Italy is developing innovative case studies linking intangible heritage and professions. This project operates across different cultural domains, from performing arts to design, from food heritage to digital storytelling. Each case studies explore how traditional knowledge can generate new jobs, creativity formats, and skill for the future. They demonstrate that intangible heritage is not static, it evolves through works of design, archivists, curators, artists, and cultural innovators. One, for example, is TRAMA, Cultural Transformation. Transformation. It's a project that maps emerging skills in the field of cultural and creativity. Led by the Politecnico of Milan, one of the most important technical universities in Europe, it combines research, digital trend analysis, and new profession linked to heritage. We have also created a narrative platform that illustrates the 7 key areas in which we are currently working. The narrative platform, food and wine heritage, led by Treccani, most important encyclopedia in Italy. It focuses on Italy's rich gastronomy culture, exploring it from a linguistic and cultural perspective. The project is a study of how language, tradition, and territory shapes our identity through food. Film censorship in Italy, digitalization, metadatabases, and online accessibility of film review archives. A research strand on ethnomusicology, exploring sound practices and acoustic ecologies in performance context. Fashion and design as expressive languages, storytelling, visual culture, cultural memory, and digital mapping of Italian archives and museums dedicated to fashion and craft. Music, digital reconstruction of lost musical practices and historic sheet music publishing, and linguistic, the Atlante Linguistico Italiano, and the digitalization of dialect heritage with postcard and cinema application. We are working on this project with Università di Firenze e Università Ca' Foscari di Venezia. Focusing on performing arts, developing of national database to simplify access to theatrical heritage, census and digitalization of theatrical archives in the Milano and Roma areas, national mapping of Italian theater and archival connection with a special focus on the work and legacy of women scenographers, presented through interactive restitution. And, last but not least, Luciana Novaro Archive, a journey across the history of dance in Italy through the legacy of a choreographer who worked at the famoso Teatro alla Scala in Milano in the 20th century. This area shows the richness and breadth of our work, a multidisciplinary approach linking tradition, innovation, and professional transformation. Heritage is alive, and performing arts make it speak. Now, new profession in the field of intangible heritage. New roles are emerging in the intersection of tradition, creativity, and technology. Cultural designer, digital ethnomusicologist, interactive archivist, community curator, they transform heritage into a system of creation, dialogue, and innovation. Professionals today, need interdisciplinary art, technology, and social research. design thinking, digital tools, community understanding. These skills are not optional. They are essential for working with living heritage. University must be incubators of hybrid profiles. They must connect design and heritage, digital and storytelling theory and practice. The University of Milan, through changes, is building these new spaces where tradition, innovation and responsibility prepare tomorrow professionals. Intangible heritage requires strong and intelligent governance, networks that connect institutions, professionals and communities, observatories to monitor change and identify emerging needs, alliances that cross national and disciplinary borders. A concrete example is the postgraduate course in design and digital technology for intangible cultural heritage, offered by the University of Milano Statale, which successfully launched its first edition in 2024. The course trains professionals to design and manage high complexity digital projects, combines a design driver and curatorial approach with expertise in digital heritage, immersive technologies, and cultural communication. It connects university, museums, tech companies, and local communities, offering hands-on training in interaction design, storytelling, immersive exhibition, and curatorship. Last but not least, we also mention the bachelor program, Ancient Civilization for Contemporary World, gently hosted by the University of Milan and Ca' Foscari University of Venice. This program explores how ancient tradition can help interpret and engage with the complexity of today's world, bridging classical knowledge and contemporary critical thinking. This training path reflects the growing of emerging sectors, performing arts and music, cultural services, digital startups, archives and museums, heritage communities, tourism, education, publishing. These are real opportunities to give value to heritage and to generate new works. We believe that intangible heritage is not only what we protect, it's what we activate, reinterpret, and carry forward. Between Italy and Japan, tradition becomes dialogue. Between past and future, culture becomes action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alberto. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Paolo Carafa. I'm a professor of classical archaeology in Sapienza University of Rome. Classical archaeology means basically archaeology of Greece and Rome, since the 8th century BCE until the beginning of the Middle Ages, broadly speaking. I would like just to share with you a brief introduction to what my colleague is going to say, getting deeper into the point we will be discussing now, about heritage in Sapienza, and heritage for Sapienza, especially in terms of assets to be shared, aiming at the preservation, the communication, the management of what we define as cultural heritage. And cultural heritage is an issue of interest for many, many programs in Sapienza. Archaeology, architecture, classics, but also engineer, life science and biosciences. And the premise of all this is what we, our idea of heritage. We define heritage as a broad unity, or if you want, as an integrated reality connecting different entities or entities of different kinds, surely objects, architecture, territories and landscapes, that is artifacts, but we have just heard about this, also memories, tales, music, images, thoughts, traditions. So this bulk of information is actually represented by fragments, basically. This is one example of one of the most relevant archaeological sites, I think, in the world. It is the Roman Forum and the core of the archaeological area of Rome. But what you can see is just an amount of pieces. Because these fragments, either tangible or intangible, have been, even though temporarily sometimes, dots of a unified map, not in a system of relation, not in a network. And the relation establishing and revealing this network have been constantly reassessed through time. And this is the reason why, aiming at managing the heritage, we have to start from a perspective of an historical narrative, because we are dealing with stuff which is what we have out of a living entity, which is the cultural process. And as a cultural process, it expresses and represents the culture of individuals and societies. Starting from what we do, basically, we apply scientific methods and procedures to classify these things and to turn these things into documents. We have seen the photograph of the archaeological area in Rome. This is the same place assessed in an information system in bi-dimensional images or in three-dimensional images. And all this, which is per se a document, so we have a first layer of information, and then the representation of that information, which is created by our work, which is a document as well. But inside all this, we have the history of the process. And this number of images represents how many topographical layout have been attested in that spot for a number of centuries. So you can perceive the relevance of documenting, assessing, and transforming this something into a possible process. Just another example, the Palatine here in Rome, you can have the Colosseum up there, what we call the southwest corner of the hill. You see the Circus Maximus in the center of the images. As usual in Rome, this spot is full of what we call the evidence, walls, objects, and we can represent all this, as you can see in this slide. We can measure all this, we can analyze all this. This is the kind of terrible images that the archaeologists are used to create, to identify how many actions, how many human actions can be identified within that ruin, and in the end, all we have will be a story. For example, the man who decided to run the Roman state, Octavian, decided also to live in the place of Rome when they believed that Rome itself had been founded, and created a house like this, quite simple for a Roman aristocrat, with 2 courtyards with columns. At the end of the Civil War, when he succeeded in being the one, the Roman Empire was born, and the architecture is the counterpart of this historical process, and that house at your left had been destroyed, backfilled, and substituted by that parts, which is, by the way, the first material parts of Rome, and so in Western history, by the way. More than this, the following emperors enlarged the Roman Empire, strengthened their powers, and enlarged the imperial parts. So 3 images representing 3 frames of one story based on the detailed knowledge of this bulk of information. Since 5 years ago, Sapienza had the honor of being ranked #1 in the world classics, #1 in the world for classic studies, and a minor ranking for different disciplines as well. So as at least alleged world leader, we have the commitment of sharing all this, of sharing procedures, sharing methods, sharing the way we can suggest that all these entities, once again, that we define heritage because they contain the necessary information to reveal culture, can be narrated, can be used to document local history in the sense of very detailed history. So everything will be turned into assets to be shared as knowledge, but also to be used in research and teaching track to improve the acquisition of soft and hard skills to create new professionals, aiming at the communication and the enhancement and presentation of the heritage. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Carlo Bianchini.
Unless you look.
Carlo Bianchini, I am an architect, not an archaeologist, and I have a heritage. My duty, let's say, to this afternoon is to point out a specific type of intangible cultural heritage. Starting from this declaration, we all know this UNESCO Declaration 2003, in which has been stated officially, let's say, that intangible heritage are sort of tangled into object. So any built object actually is expression of tangible and intangible. My aim today is to show a specific intangible aspect that in the end will turn to have a contribution also in imagining new professionals in this. Starting with some examples, these are 6 ancient theaters around the Mediterranean coming from a UE funded program like 10 years ago. And of course, when we look and think of ancient theaters, the intangible component is there because most of them are used today for representation. My duty, let's say, to this afternoon is to point out a specific type of intangible cultural heritage. Starting from this declaration, we all know this UNESCO Declaration 2003, in which has been stated officially, let's say, that intangible heritage are sort of tangled into object. So any built object actually is expression of tangible and intangible. My aim today is to show a specific intangible aspect that in the end will turn to have a contribution also in imagining new professionals in this. Starting with some examples, these are 6 ancient theaters around the Mediterranean coming from a UE funded program like 10 years ago. And of course, when we look and think of ancient theaters, the intangible component is there because most of them are used today for representation and so on. But what is my aim is to investigate the recipe question. What is the recipe? The recipe is the way any built object, of course this is why I'm an architect, maybe this is my point of view, how any built object has been constructed, built as a rule And this rule is not necessarily geometrical, it implies many other components that are really cultural. For example, here there is a little display of a sort of testing of Vitruvius' rule about the proportional design of ancient theaters with the 6 theaters, in 5 theaters we have investigated, just to see if there is a coherence or not coherence with the rule. And again, this is, let's say, on every paper today or yesterday, because it's St. Peter Dome. And the reason for this investigation was to investigate the shape of the dome. As you know, this implies it is useful for many reasons, let's say, to know the shape of structure, etc., but also to understand what has been, for example, the design and the shape imagined by the designer. So this is really intangible. Again, another dome, this is Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. And here you can see more or less the same in a very different context, because the dome of Hagia Sophia, given the many collapses and deformation it has had along its life, it's quite a complicated shape to investigate. The new technologies, and it is interesting to see on the bottom right, you have like a 2D investigation. We will come after on this idea of the 2D investigation. Instead, we have a 3D investigation of the other. So interpolation points with very refined geometric software and instruments in order to provide the most probable shape of that sphere, because it is known it was a sphere. And then the last one, newborn, let's say, it's the Aachen Cathedral. In Europe, it's very famous because it's the Palatine Chapel from Charlemagne. And we made a discovery here, because those triangular vaults are cones. And this is really odd in the history of architecture. This simply was not possible without the application of technologies, of course, the instruments we have today. But on the other hand, once you have discovered and verified it is a cone, then you must actually tackle the problem why there is a cone, where it comes from. And this is really intangible, because it's something that implies literature investigation, history of architecture, stylistic implication. And so, you know, this tangle between tangible and intangible is always there in any field. But this is completely different. Nobody knows about this. It's the house of this poet. It's a very famous Italian poet, Valentino Zaiken, one of the most important poets in the 20th century in Italy. And he used to live in a house that was a shack, really. It was an illegal house in the very center of Rome, near the Piazza del Popolo. And after he died, there was a problem what to make this house. Because this house was a sort of meeting point for all the intellectuals in the Roman, let's say, in that period in Rome. So artists, painters, sculptors, poets, again, were meeting there. Mostly every weekend they had dinner outside in the garden. And so it was like an unpredictable outcrop of heritage. You know, sometimes you have this outcrop somewhere, not even in a place. And so what to do with this? Again, intangible, tangible. And our approach was to treat this as a crime scene. To document the position of every object, because you know it's subjected to degradation very quickly after the death of the. And we are ongoing trying to understand in terms of design what to do. Create a house of poetry, or we shall see. But however, it was interesting for me to present this to you. Innovation, what does it mean? First, doing better what we used to do. And here you have another example in Rome, the Arc of Janus. After putting together all these three possibilities that comes from application of technology, you get a final drawing, survey drawing of the object that is more complete. So technology and innovation allows us for doing better what we still do. But much more than this, it allows us to do something that simply before was not possible. And this is an application of San Lorenzo in Miranda, that already Professor Carafa has shown to you, in which there is application of machine learning to identify the holes and classify them after the manual training that a human operator has provided to the machine. Say. So this is no more, I would say, a frontier is there, machine learning, AI, and so on. And the final one is that, the final remark is that it's not possible to have the technologies, these remarks, etc., results without setting up a real workflow for training of the different human figures that must tackle this problem. And here there is, this is really a new board, is recently approved by European Union project, in which there is a sort of design, it's starting now the project, involving different figures that are sort of chained together in the training. So it's not necessarily a top-down approach, but it's more integrated. You see this group A, group B, group B, group C are different level of trainers that exchange also the roles during the training. And the aim of these and these barriers and the Do Think Toolkit is our answer at the moment, but the barriers are there in order to make all the idea of new professional we can imagine dealing with cultural age, both intangible and intangible, really effective. Without this joint effort in which technology, training, and so university and other bodies must engage themselves in this, I think we shall be always in this sort of scattered situation in which you have some very interesting